since that time, they've launched several, maybe 60 satellites that were amateur radio, and some are still operational. A good example is AO7 was launched in 1974. And what happened with that satellite is it was launched, it was operational for a short amount of time, probably less than 10 years. Then it went dark. And then about 1980, it went back in operation. What we think happened is that the battery had quit. It wouldn't cycle anymore. The solar panels were still supplying power, and then it got an open circuit from the battery to the solar panels, but it's still got a closed circuit to the transmitter. So when this thing's in sunlight, it'll relay. When it's in eclipse, it won't. And it operates to this day. There's still people using it. And it has 10 meters, and it also has 2 meters. So there's mode A and mode B. And it'll flip, and they don't want it to flip to 10. They want to keep it on 2 meters. So they watch the power uplink on that. AO91 was launched in 2017. That is going to pass overhead at 9:38 Pacific time. When it started out, I operated that, and I started doing satellites in 2018, and that just was a powerhouse. It was great. You could get into it, you could hear it well. In the last couple of years, it's been intermittent, but it's still operational. In fact, we may get a chance to hear it today. We'll see, but it's quite a little satellite. One of the things that's changed in satellites is if you look at AO7, it's a pretty good sized satellite, and it was at a higher orbit. Around the mid-teens, they began putting up what they call microsats, which are basically, that thing is only about this big. That's it. And they put them at a orbit at about 600 kilometers, 250 miles. So they were in lower orbit, so we could hear them, we could get into them a lot easier with modest equipment. Okay, types of satellites. AO7 is an example of a linear satellite. AO91 is an FM satellite. Like a repeater that can only be one person transmitting at a time. Linear has a passband. Today we're going to talk about FM operation, primarily with words like AO91 or the ISS. There's also data satellites that only do data. They do store and forward, packet, they do APRS and SSTV. And this is a view of the ISS through a satellite here on Earth. And so you can actually see the solar panels. I thought I'd include that. Okay, here's some examples of who I've talked to via amateur radio on the ISS using that station.
This is Kilo Bravo 8, Bravo Mike Yankee, KD8 BMY, and CN87. BMY, Kilo November 6, Echo Victor, Quebec, Charlie Mike 97. Okay, real good. Charlie Mike 97, we copy, and please copy CN87. CN87, we're near Olympia. Good morning. Charlie, November 87 in Olympia, Mark in Patterson, California. Okay, real good, Mark. Good to hear California. 7-3, KVA PMI. Kilo 7 Oscar Golf Whiskey, KVA BMY, please copy CN87. Good morning. Good morning, Clyde. 73, so thank you for the kiss. 7-3, KVA BMY. Kilo Echo 7, Kilo Echo, this is Kilo Bravo 8, Bravo Mike Yankee, KBA BMY, CN87.
Okay, Charlie, your Kilo Bravo 8, Bravo Mike Yankee is Charlie November 87, and Kilo Echo 7, Kilo Echo Delta November 14. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. 7-3, good morning, KBA BMY. This is Kilo Bravo 8, Bravo Mike Yankee, KBA BMY, and Charlie November 87, Olympia, Washington.
Kilo Bravo 8, Bravo Mike Yankee, Kilo 9, Tango Yankee, Echo Nancy 52.
Kilo 9, Tango Yankee, KBA BMY, thanks, and 7-3 from CN87, KBA BMY.
Working out west, finally going.
Okay, and I imagine most of you copy Morse code, that's NA1SS, that's the ISS station IDing, just like a terrestrial repeater. And as you can see, I worked all those contacts in one morning, and I used it using exactly this setup. And 2 UV5Rs, a duplexer, and a Yagi antenna. And we're only talking, what, a couple watts. So that's quite a distance for that. Now, along with talking to other people, mostly in this case you can see it's in the western United States from where we're at. I've talked as far east as Michigan, obviously Wisconsin I mentioned there, and so you can get a pretty good distance. So we're talking to other ham stations, but one of the other things you can do on ISS is you can talk to the crew if you get lucky.
NA1SS is listening.
NA1SS, this is Kilo Bravo 8, Bravo Mike Yankee in Olympia, Washington. Good afternoon.
Kilo Bravo 8, Bravo Mike Yankee. Welcome aboard NA1SS, the International Space Station. I really enjoy it out there in Olympia.
Very good. It's an honor to speak with you, and thanks for your service. Good to hear the space station this afternoon. Over.
It's great to talk with you, 73.
7-3, this is KBA BMY.
NA1SS, over.
And how that happened is I was out at Tomey, if you know where Tomey State Park was. And I went out there, I was just going to operate some contacts, and it came over the horizon, and all of a sudden he came on. And what happens is the crew, if they have time and they want to operate, the station's right there. It's right in the cabin. It has a microphone. They can kind of, I guess they float over. They float over it. They grab the microphone and they just have conversations. And it was really neat. And I've worked them 3 times. Not the same person, obviously, different crew members. And this one and I think one of the other ones, same thing. It came over the horizon. He came on. I worked the guy. And next thing you know, as soon as you could hear it going east, and he got a pilot. I mean, it was like any DX pilot you'd hear on the bottom of 20. And so it was really neat. It was just exciting. This will give you an idea of what's in there.
Bravo Mike Yankee, KBA BMY, in Charlie November 87, Olympia. Alpha 7, Romeo Mike. This is KBA BMY. Good to hear Everett. CN87 here. Oh, wow. Okay, we're going to have to send you a paper QSL card. Congratulations. Welcome to the birds. And 7-3 there in Everett. KBA BMY. Olympia.
guy, the reason I like that is that was that guy's first satellite contact. So he had put together a station, and I was the first guy he worked. And I mentioned paper QSL card because back in the day it was just a QSL card, but now it's like, oh, it's a paper QSL card. And a lot of people, what they do is they go through Logbook of the World. A lot of guys who are paper chasers, it works out really good. And they do that a lot here. We'll cover that in a minute. But I like to always send a QSL card if it's something special or special event. So it's kind of a new thing. And so now how can all of you do that, what I just showed you? Okay, understanding radio satellite basics. What we're going to cover is basically how satellites work, tracking their path to know when they're overhead and where to aim your antenna, knowing what frequency to transmit on and receive, knowing what equipment you need to make it happen, knowing how to troubleshoot problems as they arise. Also we'll cover awards and how to QSL with the satellite contacts is a little bit different. It's a little bit different than, say, if you're working someone on 15 or 20 meters. Okay. Now, we mentioned before how I talked to a lot of stations in the western United States. I got a little bit to the east. That's dictated by the satellite's footprint. And again, we got to remember that this satellite is up at 600 kilometers, so it's in low elliptical orbit. It's not super high up. And the best way to understand how a footprint works with the satellite is if you had a globe and a flashlight and you came up close to that globe, that circle is going to get smaller. If I go in a higher orbit, I pull that flashlight away, that circle is going to get wider. Ideally, if you had a pretty serious station and you had that satellite way out there, you could cover half the globe. The catch is you'd have to have a pretty substantial station, and most of us won't be able to do that. Back in the day, that's what they did. They had them on high elliptical orbits. So they would take, and say you'd have the globe, and it would go way out and come back in. A pass could last hours, but again, it was a rich man's game. Most of the guys that were in satellites, they'd say, oh, I did satellites. Wow, this is like in the 1980s. It's like, wow, that's pretty slick. It's, how much does that cost? And they say, oh, 10 grand, 5 grand, whatever. It's like, okay. Well, like I say, with the advent of low elliptical orbit satellites, it makes it possible for everybody to get involved. The catch is that footprint is going to be smaller. So in our case, it's going to cover the western United States. Now, one of the things too is, let's say, for example, we were right in the middle, and say the satellite was right overhead. Well, half of it's going to be over the Pacific, the other half's going to be somewhere on the other side of the Cascades. So if you really want to work distance on the LEO satellite, you really want it over, say, on the other side of, say, Colorado, other side of Montana. You're going to be on the edge, and you're going to get that distance you want. And the catch with that is, it's going to be low on the horizon. The easiest ones ahead is way over. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. When they get over low on the horizon, it's going to get a little tricky as far as that goes. But again, we'll cover a little bit more of how that happens too. By the way, too, when it comes up, when we cover, I'll cover that in a minute. Okay, the orbits. ISS has a really neat orbit. What it does is, as you can see, it's in this type of pattern. Because of that, when it does a pass, we're going to get 4 or 5 passes in one day. AO91 will only give you 1 pass every 12 hours. Okay, so it'll pass over, like when I was working it down in Texas, it would pass over at about 11 o'clock local time in the morning. And then 11, 12 o'clock midnight, 12 hours later. And it was more of a polar orbit. So we go north and south, where ISS goes more towards the west to the east. So again, I like ISS for a couple of reasons. One, it has a really strong transmitter. The current equipment they have on there now is easy to get into. It can hear you, and you have multiple opportunities. When I started out, and I was using AO91, and there was also AO92, which went dark. But back then it was operational. Both of them worked really well. satellite orbits, passes would get really busy, because think if you had a repeater that's everybody in your whole part of the country could hear. Everybody's going to want to work that, okay? And so you got 10 minutes horizon to horizon, and it's like the biggest pileup you've ever seen. So what I would do is I would get up in the middle of the night, and I would operate. There were like 2 or 3 of us. For some reason, nobody got up in the middle of the night. So it was a great chance to practice. I could practice tracking it and what have you. Okay, we're going to talk about full duplex too, and we kind of covered that with the radio you were talking about. I have 2 radios, and the reason I do is because I want to hear myself on the downlink. The main reason is to know how well I'm getting in. There's another reason too, because if I just key up and I can't tell if I'm getting in, I've got kind of a partial signal, a noisy signal, and again, you've got 10 minutes horizon rising. So let's say, for example, I just grab one radio and I go, hey, I'm just going to try to get in, and I start throwing out my call. Now I'm going to start stepping all over other stations with a noisy signal. They're not going to hear me. And it basically is going to tie up about half the pass or a quarter of the pass trying to get in, and I don't even know if I got in. So full duplex is very important. In a pinch, it'll work with that duplex, but it's poor operating practice. You want to hear yourself in that downlink. Okay, another thing we're going to talk about is Doppler. That was named after a scientist from the 1800s who had discovered a phenomenon where if a train was coming and it sounded a whistle, if you're standing on that train, that pitch never changes. But if you're standing on the ground and that train goes by, you hear that pitch drop. And we've all heard trains go by and it kind of and it kind of drops down. That's Doppler effect. So any passing object, the frequency of the object will change to the stationary observer. It'll drop in frequency. That affects on the audio level frequencies, but also at radio frequencies. Any frequency is going to have an effect. And it has an effect on satellites. So as that satellite passes by, it's going to drop in frequency. If we look at that, it's going to drop. On linear satellites, you have to slide the dial. Yeah.
So if you're on the ground at an intersection and a train comes by, as it approaches you, the frequency goes up. And then after it passes, it goes down.
Goes down.
Same thing with the satellite?
Yeah, and I was going to get to that.
Okay.
Normally, most of the time, we're going to track it going down. And on these FM stations, it's simply going to drop. It's not. It'll go up. It's not going to be appreciable. So we're going to focus on dropping our frequency, not bringing it up. However, this is more kind of the advanced thing. Let's say, for example, you have a linear satellite, and they had a couple of Chinese satellites, the XW series, and they were in the late teens. They were on. And if it went over the horizon, again, you drop frequency to correct for Doppler. But I can remember on the polar orbiting satellites, that thing's coming at you. And it's like moving fast, because again, 10 minutes horizon rises. So this thing's moving really fast. As it came towards me, that frequency would go up slightly, not a lot, but it would come up. Then it would be right overhead and start passing, then it would drop fast. And I say fast because if it's going to be an overhead pass, that frequency is going to come up fast and it's going to drop fast. On a horizon, it's not going to be, the rate of Doppler is not going to be as pronounced. So for that satellite, the low horizon ones, which gave me more distance, they were also easier to work because I didn't have to change the frequency as quickly. On FM, you usually have 5 increments. Now as it changes, 437, 810, is it going to be 437, 808? Yeah, but we're not going to worry about that because FM is so wide, we can just wait till we start losing them on 810 and then drop to 805. Start losing them on 805, pick them up on 800. We'll hear them be able to hear them pretty much on both, and when it'll be stronger on one, we'll start dropping it on the previous one. So we can make those 5 increments. But if you're on a linear satellite on sideband, an upper or lower sideband, you've got to be right on, and your rate has to be perfect, because if it's not, you're going to either sound like Donald Duck or you're going to sound low. And just like if you're off frequency on the low bands, it's the same thing. And so that rate is very critical. And a lot of guys, what they'll do is they'll take and they'll use, like the fancy stations, I'll show that in a minute, but they'll have the computer control azimuth elevation, they'll have the computer control the frequency and everything like that. And they just hit the PTT and that's all they have to do. So for FM though, it's just, you just click them, and that's about it. And here's something else you might notice too. We're only changing one of the bands, okay? Theoretically, this one on 145.99, that's going to be subject to Doppler too. However, again, we can get by with transmitting and holding that transmit frequency. In this example on 145.99, but on the UHF frequency, we're going to change for Doppler. They call it the rule of the higher band, basically. If I'm not able to switch both, I'm going to at least switch the one that's on the higher frequency. It's always going to be UHF, obviously. In this case, I'm uplinking on 145.99. I'm downlinking, listening on UHF. On AO91, it's the other way around. So when you go from one satellite to the other, you may switch that. And at first you think, oh, it's not a big deal, but it has an effect, right? Because now if I'm listening on if I'm doing AO91, my transmit frequency is going to vary. And I'm just going to listen. It's going to be easy. I'm just going to listen on one frequency. That's it. But if I want to get into it, I want to transmit, I'm going to vary that frequency. On ISS, I'm going to have to, I can transmit all day on the same frequency. It'll hear me. Everybody will hear me. But if I want to hear them, I've got to correct for Doppler. So those are some of those effects you have to pay attention to. Okay, what's out there? There's a lot of satellites out there. And there's more going up every day. There are, I think at last count, I had in my notes, somewhere around 20 to 40,000, something like that. I mean, just a lot. Like a crazy amount. And it's more now because of Starlink and what have you. Currently, I believe they say the estimate is about 20 amateur satellites that are operational. And that covers all of them, the ones that are FM, sideband, digital, and what have you. How do we find that out? And how do we find out which ones are out there? Well, we can do the status page here. And I looked at the status page this morning. This obviously isn't it's a slide, it's not a live one. But I did look at the live one this morning, and that's how I found out that right about now, IO91's going to pass over. And we check to see what their conditions are. So we look, 91, this morning, you can see it's intermittent. Okay, so it's blue, they've heard it, maybe they worked it. Red, they didn't hear it at all, but they were listening for it. Yellow, they only heard telemetry, maybe a beep, and that's it. So this is a valuable page, and I'll have that on the links section. So I kind of misspoke. That's how we know which ones are working, which ones are operational. How do we know when they're going to pass over? This is one of the ways. This will let us know, you put in your location, it'll let us know which ones are passing overhead. This is a web page you would have on a computer, and if you're just seeing what's upcoming today, what's coming, in the next few hours, you can use that. But we're not going to have a computer out there. We're going to have this, and what I would do is I would take, and if I want to track it, I take, there's my computer, and I would have one of these applications on my phone. And then I could see what's, not only I could see upcoming passes, but I could also physically track it as it goes over there. Okay, what frequencies do we go on? Now, one of the things is if we go back here, I can click on these, and this will tell us when they launched, what the payload was, what rocket they went on, what it will tell us the frequencies too for each one. But if I want to say, okay, I want to program this radio for 5 satellites, and I'm sitting there, I just want the frequencies, I want the satellites, I want to know what they're on. I would use a chart. In this case, I just pick what satellites I want to work. And then I program in my frequencies. You can see we have correction for Doppler. And on all these are all FM. And as you can see, let's look at AO 90, and 92, see they have that up there, I want to leave that up there, 91. Okay, so I'm listening, or I'm sorry, I'm transmitting on UHF, and I'm listening on one fixed frequency. On ISS, it's the opposite. And it's really significant, because you think, oh, it's simple, okay, that's my output, that's my download, no big deal. Then you go out there and all of a sudden you don't hear anything. It's like, I know that satellite was supposed to pass by, what's going on? You switched them, or you didn't program it right because you were in a hurry, you're all excited. And we've all done it. Okay, equipment. And we were talking about elk. This is an Arrow antenna. Arrow makes a couple different models you can check on the website. I have one without a duplexer. You can put a duplexer in there. They include it if you want in some of the models. Elk has a built-in duplexer. And the duplexer is important because that way, let's say I don't want to use 2 radios. Let's say I only want to use 1. The catch is it has to have a full duplex. And there's very few that have it. There are some, but there's very few that have it. So that's why you see a lot of guys using 2 radios instead of 1. Over here on the right, that's the fancy one. This is where they have the azimuth elevation antennas, 9700. You'll hear guys on a satellite working like 50 watts with one of those. You don't need that. You can hit these satellites with 1 watt. Here's my stations. That's my linear station. Again, 2 radios. So what did I do? I took an 817 and an 818. One I transmit, one I receive on. And that's it. And again, I'm tracking it. Something I can do with that you can't do with the LEOPAC on a fixed station is I can correct for polarity. Okay, so this satellite comes over, and I'm tracking it. On ISS, it's not as pronounced, but on AO91, that little cube, that thing's spinning. And as it spins, its polarity is going to change. Now, ideally, you would use a circularly polarized antenna to correct for that. But most people don't use that. What they do is they use a Yagi antenna. So they're going to correct for polarity. You can't do that on a fixed azimuth elevation because it ain't going to turn. And so there are a lot of times where those guys are running maybe 10 watts, hopefully, not 50, and it'll fade out to them. It won't fade out to me because I was correcting it. And so that's kind of a big deal. And here's another shot of the station here. And as you can see, that's what it looks like. Now, when I first put this thing up, there were a couple other guys out there who did it. I took a lot of heat from some of the established guys. They're like, you can't put that on, you're going to mess up your SWR. I said, well, it has a gamma match. I could put a meter on, and if I put that on and it's off, which it wasn't, but if it was, I can adjust, I can compensate for that. And it's like, why would I want to make such a big deal out of having this? Well, right on here, a couple of reasons. One is, I can use a screen recorder. Now I can record it, because remember, I'm going to run out of hands. So I'm not going to log like I'm sitting in a ham shack. So I want to record the pass. So it'll automatically record it. I could use an MP3 recorder or a WAV recorder, whatever, but this will do it, so it's all there. The other thing is I can, just like if you go to target shooting, you go to the range, you look through the sight, if your sight's set correctly, you're going to hit that target, right? This is the same way. If this thing's set up right, I'm going to aim right at it, and that satellite is right there. It's not over a couple degrees, it's right there. And what was interesting is when I first started out, I didn't do that. I didn't think to do it. I I would take this thing, and again, it was, you know, any time of year, it's nice there. It's either nice or it's hot, but it's not cold. So I would go out and I would just set that thing down, and I would aim the antenna, and I'd look at it, and look at the pass, and it's just, well, I think it's over there, or maybe it's over there, you know. And I got good at hearing it and saying, okay, I'm pretty well right on. But again, that would be like if you were standing over there and you go, hey, Mike, and you blindfold me, and it says, okay, I think you're over here. I could do it, but not with super accuracy. So a lot of passes, it was kind of a hit and miss. I could do it. I got pretty good at it. But when I put this on, it was a game changer. When I put that on, I hit it every time I aimed at it. I knew where it was at. And so I went from like maybe I get a contact on a pass, maybe I won. When I put that thing on, I was getting 3, 4, 5 contacts every pass. It was like bam, 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 every time. So, you know, again, you have to configure your station how you want, as long as it's within the regulations. But I like this idea, you know. So it's worked out really well.
Is that something that you purchased, or did you manufacture that?
All this is off the shelf. What I did is, this is actually, let's see, 3 parts. Yeah, 3 parts, 2 parts. This part here is for a camera mount. So you could put like a SLR camera, and this could go on a railing. Some people use it if they're, for whatever purpose, I guess, wildlife photography. They can put on something and just have it fixed. And then this is obviously for a cell phone. That could be mounted onto a tripod or whatever you want. So it's actually 2 parts, to answer your question. And
So you MacGyvered that?
yeah, kind of MacGyver.
Okay.
Kind of MacGyver. But again, I didn't have to machine any of it. It was already made. I just thought, hey, I need this, I'll put it together. But, yeah. So, and so that's kind of how that worked. And again, I can't say enough about the difference in accuracy. Okay, one of the things too, we talked about the difference between AO91 and ISS, how those uplink and downlink are different. If I'm working 91, I'm transmitting on UHF, I'm listening on VHF. So when I transmit, I'm not really going to blow away my receive that much. It's not that big of a deal. But on ISS, it's the other way around. If I'm transmitting on VHF and I'm listening on UHF, when I transmit, I'm going to desense my receive. So what do I do about that? I mean, my antennas are right next to each other, right? Here's my VHF and my UHF. So for that, I use filtering. I started out using this. It was okay, but the thing that really made the difference is I wanted better filtering. So duplexer is probably a pretty good choice, and that made a big difference. And what I've done is the UHF side, you can see I have it on here, and the VHF side, I just don't connect it, don't have it. So now I have that isolation on it. And it's not totally perfect, but it's pretty good. It works out pretty good. Okay. The other reason filtering is so important is when you look at the station, I'm using a $12 radio. This doesn't have any filtering, so that filtering is very important. Why am I using a $12 to $25 radio? Because I wanted to see if I could make this thing as inexpensive as possible. Why? Because if I can do it, a lot of other guys can do it. If they can do it, they can get on the air, they can get on satellite stations. By being able to do that, that costs for the whole station is about under $300. Okay, compare that to $5 grand back in the day. I don't know. Most people, I think, can afford that. And even then, let's say, for example, you take one of these away and you use your favorite Kenwood Icon, you know, one from the big 3. There's your receive radio because you've got a really good receiver on those. Your transmit radio can still be one of these because the transmit's got punchy audio on these and it works great. They'll hear you and they'll hear you really well. So you can do that. In the case, again, ISS, you can hear it good, you can get into it good. I can use these. And I want to mention, let's see if we go up here, if I have it, yeah. Let's be real, these pick up a lot of noise. So if you're going to use these, remember when I told you I worked the ISS with that? I was at Tomey, I was in the middle of the woods, okay? A few years ago, I went up to Seattle at a field day. And I thought, hey, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to work ISS. This is great. And we're in the city and there's a Space Needle over there and this is great. I'm having some Starbucks. I couldn't hear anything. I mean, I could hear the club repeater. That's all I could hear. Why? Because there's a loud noise floor. I'm in the city. There's all sorts of RF. But when I'm out in the country, out at Tomey, there's nothing out there but squirrels and rabbits. They're not doing anything. So that's the catch. You can use this setup, and again, this is nice because out here we're in the country, right? You don't have a lot of traffic, you don't have a lot of noise. This will work out here. That's the catch. If, again, you're going to be somewhere where you're going to pick up noise, use a little bit better receiver. But again, if you say, well, I only got one Yaesu, I only got one Kenner, what do I do? Well, use that for your receive, use that for your transmit. When I started out, I actually did that. I had a Yaesu I used for my receive radio on A191, and it worked really well. So that's the thing. Again, you got to look at your equipment, look at its limitations and what have you. Let's go back up to this. And as you can see, this is as of February. What I did is I had made a slide like this a couple of years ago, and I updated the pricing for inflation, which is, I guess is kind of a thing now. It's kind of like the 70s or something. But even then, those prices didn't go up very much. Not really. And I broke down everything we have here. And it was pretty easy to put together, but I didn't really think about it.
Mike, could you send that to me and I can forward it to the group?
This slide? Yeah.
Yeah, just that list.
Yeah. FM satellite protocol, I mentioned. It's a 10-minute pass and everybody wants to work it. It's going to get hairy. Okay, it's going to be boarding house reach. And the best way to understand it, let's say you get on the local repeater, I get on your repeater, you know, I'm going to wait and everything and be polite, because we're going to be polite. But if you're a pilot, how many of you guys have worked a DX station? He's on an island. He's only going to be there for a week. And you really want to QSL this guy, okay? And if you're on phone, if you're on CW, it's funny on CW because it always sounds like a bunch of bees. And it's really that way. So it's boarding house reach. Okay, and during the exchanges, because of that, we're not going to get on and we're not going to rate you, right? Because everybody wants to work it. So it's going to move fast. Standard exchange, call sign, mate, and grid coordinates. Here's some tips. Take time to listen to the passes. Practice tracking the satellite, practice changing frequencies to adjust for Doppler, listen to how the stations operate and interact with one another. You're going to hear a rhythm. And you've heard the recording there. Those were pretty, in my opinion, they were pretty mellow passes. They weren't like back in the day with AO91. But you could hear when I worked that guy, that was his first contact. He said, you know, his first contact, I went to pass it back to him, or he passed it back to me. Another guy just threw his call in, right in the middle of our QSM. That's how it works. That's what happens. So, again, you're going to run into that. So you want to get comfortable with how those passes work. Great idea. Like I did, I practice overnight. When there's less traffic, it's a good way to learn and practice your operating technique.
Primary ignition.
There you go. It only takes a watt. You don't need 50 watts. And you will hear guys out there, they'll think, you know, I'm going to get that grid. And they crank it up to 25 or 50 watts. 1 watt will do it, guys. That's all it takes. And the grids, okay? So what happens is a lot of you are familiar with the maintenance grid system. this tells us is, what are the grids most people don't have? And just like the heat map, the ones that are red and orange, those are the ones that are most in demand. You get back over here in the highly populated areas, a lot of people have already got them, but there's still people who need them. This map is really good if you want to rove. And rovers cover the areas where people don't live, right? There's either, if there's a ham there, he's not on satellites. In some cases, right, we can go into the Cascades. We can go up on the peninsula here. And you can see the overlay of the, the peninsula, what have you. Way out here on the tip, they used to be real hot. They used to be like 46%. The lower the number means the less people have that grid, the more people want it. You can see over here by ocean shores, some of that. And down here, way down, these are really hot. These are in the Cascades, that's in a mountain range there. So what happens is if you want to get those grids, just like that D-Expedition, you have to wait till somebody goes out there, because nobody lives there. So you have to wait for a grid rover to go out there.
Huh.
And that's it, that's their last best hope, is the grid rovers. And anybody can do it. I mean, here's what's neat about it. It's your chance to be the D-Expedition. You know, you look at these guys and they go on an island and it takes them a year or a couple of years to put together a D-Expedition. They find some island like in the South Pacific or something. You're like, God, that would be so cool to do that. Like everybody's trying to work these guys. It's a lot of fun and everything. You could do that as a rover. And you go out, that's in Ocean Shores. And I was working actually a grid line there. This was a grid down in Texas on the coast that was pretty hot. And we just hop in the car and go out there. It was a blast. When we moved up here, my wife's from here. Originally, she grew up here. And I'm originally from the Midwest. But we were living in Texas. And on the way up here, the first thing she said to me, she said, "Do you want to rove grids on the way up?" I go, "Yeah, let's do that." So we looked at the grid map. We timed the legs of the trip where we were going to drive, where we were going to stop, where we were going to eat, where we were going to sleep. We kind of did it around that heat map. Yeah. And she has a license as well. She's a general class. And it was a lot of fun. So that's what we did. And I can remember one morning we got up, we were in Northern California, and I'd been in Texas for 10 years, so 60 degrees was cold to me. Yeah. And we were up, I guess we were like in the mountains, and I thought, I'm going to go out in the morning, I'm going to work this pass. In Houston, I just go out like, and wear shorts like in January, right? So I get up, put on some shorts, and I go out, and it's like there's snow out there. And it's like in October. So I got a little rude awakening, but it was a lot of fun. We really enjoyed it. Okay, we talked about logging. You can use a recorder. I have two of those I use. Bless you. I have two of those I use for my linear setup, and then I use a screen recorder. And it's just the way to go. And what I do is, I have the recording. When I get done and I want to log, I'll go into the shack, I'll sit down, I'll listen to the recording, then I can type it in, and I can just put the time and everything. And what's nice about doing it with the screen recording is, I see the pass. I see the satellite going overhead. So I know exactly the time I worked the guy, I know the date and everything. When you first start out, it's going to sound like these guys are rattling the calls off really fast in their grids. And so like, what do the guys say? Well, you can always just play it back. And I had that happen where some guys, it's like I couldn't understand what they said. I had somewhere I had to play it like 5 times because I couldn't get the guy's call. Finally, I got it, you know, and so that worked out really well. Nearly all hams use Logbook of the World, and you see that with guys who run in DXers use that. It has, just to be sure, maybe, because on the screen recorder I use, for some reason, you can like turn off the recording on it. Why would you do that? But it's on a MP3 recorder, maybe something just messes up on it. So I always check that beforehand, especially if it's a password I really want to log some content. Especially if I'm roving. Every time I go out, before I go out, I do an audio check. I don't do that all the time at home, but when I was roving, those contacts are important to all those guys. So I want to make sure I get all the calls. So I'd always do an audio check. Getting rattled when other stations sound like they're speaking in super fast mode. Practice listening to passes. Listen to the call signs. Listen to the grids. Understand the grid system. If a guy rattles off a grid and he's in, you know, like the N50 or something like that, I know he's back east. Okay, I think it's like SO1 or something, that's up in Canada. And so you get to know the grid sometimes too, that helps. Because they won't say where they're at, they'll just say the grid in the call sign. The thing I do too, that I did is, I would go out like I'm going to work a pass, I'd have my recorder, I'd have my radios, and I would just listen. And I would follow along and say, if I was going to work the guy, you know, I would just listen. And so I'd say, okay, what calls did I hear? What's going on? Because if you just jump into the fray, you see guys do that too. They'll be like, yeah, and they'll like work the same guy 3 times on the pass. I've actually had guys do that to me. Like they'll say, yeah, KBMY. I said, you just work me on the same pass. You're a dude, a double, you know? And I'm nice about it. Because when you start out, we've all done it. I did it once. Once or twice when I first started out, because we got all excited. So that's why it's important just to listen. And let's see. Okay, other modes. So besides FM, ISS has a plethora of activities. And you can do APRS, which is neat. And I use this radio. This radio, this is what I call my APRS radio. This has a GPS built in. I can do APRS and just like that, or I can actually pair it with an app, so I can see a map and everything like that, or I can just do it like this. But the neat thing about it is that I can do ISS, so I can use radio on my, and that's the case where you're going to do half duplexes on radio. And it's always going to be on, in fact, I have it on here. 145.825. And so what'll happen is you'll aim up there, just like you're doing transmitting a beacon on APRS. And that's what it looks like on an application. After you do that, you can look on this list and see if it heard you. Also, you could actually have contacts. I've had guys call me and just say hi or something, and I send them a reply, hey, how's it going, or whatever. And that's during the pass. So you can actually use APRS, the messaging, and actually have a short contact with someone on there, short two-way contact. And so that's kind of neat. Okay, in fact, tomorrow, midnight tonight, is the last day of SSTV on the ISS. They're doing one. And here's how you do that. If you think that's modest, set up, when you do SSTV, all you need is just a regular HT with an HT antenna and an application. Okay, what I'm doing is, I can track it with the app, and then I can with the tracking app. And then I'll have another phone where I can pick it up. And what's really neat about the SSTV transmissions, they had one all this last week, they periodically have them. What's really neat about it is that anybody can do it. You don't even need a license because you're a receiver. So all you need is a receiver, a radio receiver, and that app is Robot 36. It's a free app you can get on Android. I'm not sure about the iPhone version, but I believe it's on the Android, which is not the same app. You see how clear that picks up. So that's kind of neat. I put a lot of the links I've talked about on my website. If you don't want to type it in, you can use a QR code. That'll take your mobile right to my site. And here I've got a screenshot of it, so it lists the contacts and web links. And
Could you go back one?
yeah. Oh yeah, sorry. I'll leave that up.
I wasn't working on it.
You bet. I'll leave that up.
Excuse me.
Listen. And basically, that's a good foundation, I think, to start out.
So I've got a question, Mike, when you're using your antenna, and we're talking about the Doppler effect,
Right.
and you're listening, let's say it's at ISS, you're transmitting on 145 or 146, and you're receiving on UHF. Are you putting your UHF receiver on scan with those frequencies that you have in there, or are you manually changing the frequency?
That's a good question. No, you don't want to do scan, because if no one's talking, it's gonna scan over another thing. The other thing too is, I'm glad you mentioned that, you're gonna switch over manually. And I'm gonna zip back to that slide if I can do it. Since we look at those frequencies. Okay, that's one. Okay. We're going to switch these manually. You don't want to scan. The other thing is you want to open up your squelching or receive radio. And that's important to mention. You can, again, ISS has a very strong transmitter. You can hear it pretty good. It'll break squelch. But the best way most people always do is they open their squelch all the way up, because you'll hear it come above the horizon. And it's kind of neat, because you'll hear, obviously static with your squelch open, and then all of a sudden you'll start hearing it come in, you'll hear the signal. And when it sets, it'll do the same thing. You kind of hear it fade up. It's kind of cool. But that's how you'll be able to hear it. And even when it's overhead, it's just a good idea to have that squelch open. You can hear that on the recordings where you heard me, you hear the squelch in between a lot of times. But they'll recommend to keep that open. But again, it's, like I say, it's going to be 5 increments on that. And, once you get good at that, at using FM, you put a station together, you operate it, and you want to do more than just exchange grid coordinates. When you go on the linear satellites, now you have a passband. So now, just like if you're, again, like on 20 meters, you've got like a section of, I don't know, 10 or 20 KCs, 10 or 20 kilohertz, probably 10 kilohertz, depending on the satellite. You have a whole spectrum there. So you can have multiple contacts. That's the case where you're actually going to have a 10-minute QSO. You're going to have a reg with the guy for 10 minutes. And the average contact on the low bands is probably about between, I don't know, 5 and 20 minutes. Most people don't sit there for hours. Some of them probably have a 15, 20-minute at the most QSO, maybe a lot of times 10. A lot of contacts that I've had on the low bands, usually a 10-minute contact, tells you where you're at, what are you using, that kind of thing. And so you can actually have a really decent, acceptable length QSO on the linear satellites, because of the fact that you can have 5 or 10 guys on there at the same time when that satellite's passing over. Now, it is possible to do that on FM, because because of the fact that we're in the northern part of the continent. There's Canadian stations on there, but there's nowhere near as many of them as there are of us, number one. Number two, we're on the edge of the continent. If I was in the middle of the continent, say I was in Chicago or something, as soon as that satellite comes above my horizon, it's going to be busy. There's going to be people on it. But here on the West Coast, when it comes up, it's above the horizon, and I'll hear it ID, but nobody's on it. I mean, the whales aren't talking on it, you know? So nobody's on it. So we're like the first ones. And then as it's passing over, say if it's a northern pass, say if that direction's north and it's passing over, and it's over, I don't know, say it's about 40 degrees. So it's going over. I've got Alaska, I've got Canada, I've got BC, then I start getting into the prairies up there, and then I've got all the PNW in California, all in one footprint, okay? But the thing is that passing over, it's not, I've had passes where there are like 3 of us on a Saturday morning, because it's a northern pass, the rest of the continent, it's below the horizon. And I've actually had reg chiefs on ISS, because I'll go on there, I'll throw out a call, somebody will come back, we'll do a contact, and I don't hear anybody, because it's just, I don't know, it's quiet, it's weird. So I'll come back and I'll say, hey, it's kind of quiet on this pass, and they'll come back, yeah. Like some guy up in the prairies will say, yeah, it's kind of quiet, we'll just talk for a couple seconds. So you can actually rate you because of where we're at on the continent. I couldn't do that in Texas. As soon as like 91 came over, I could hear all Central America, I could hear Mexico, and they were going at it. And then it would come over me, and then it would go north of me. So the whole time, that pass was packed. So they're a lot, as you can tell on the recordings, they were a lot quieter. You know, when I made the Gladiator thing, I actually made that when I was in Texas. So it's not as, it's a little bit easier here, I think, than it would be.
So Mike, what apps do you use on your phone when you've got it attached to your antenna? So you're tracking things?
Oh, yeah, I use Heavens Above. Let's go to those. Let's go back. Okay, the one I like to use Heavens Above. That's the one I've used for years. And this one, this is a fairly new one, look for SAT. And AMSAT Droid. AMSAT actually puts out one. And here's how this works. On Heavens Above, I like the way, this will track it pretty good, I can aim at it and everything like that. But if we just had a launch, say a month or so ago, what happens is they launch the satellite, they deploy it, they check it out, and then it's declared operational. Sometimes you'll get a satellite that'll go up, and Heavens Above won't pick it up all the time. It might take them a while. But AMSAT Droid, as soon as that thing deploys, right when it's operational, it'll be on there. So that's kind of a balancing act you kind of do. This one does have some of the newer ones on it. I've just started using that, so I'm not too familiar with it. So that's kind of how I work. I use this one. If it's not on there, then I go to AMSAT Droid. And maybe I'll try this one. These are my 2 go-tos.
Well, I was thinking before they even got the equipment, they could actually take a look at all these applications.
Oh, yeah.
And see what they can see, and kind of, it makes all sense then.
Yeah. And again, it's a lot, you know, I've been doing this for a while, so like I'll go out there and just, that's it, you know, it's no big deal. So I have to stop myself and think, what's it like? What was it like when I started out? And like when Ben asked me, he says, can you come out and show us? I'm like, yeah, okay. Because when I started out, there wasn't a lot of information. Yeah, it was out there, but you had to find it. You know, I don't know how many of you guys go on Facebook, but sometimes you go on the forums. We were talking about this on the phone. And I went on Facebook and I thought, well, I'll ask a question about this or that. And, you know, what equipment are, all the questions you guys probably would have. And so I saw somebody ask the same question I asked. And they just lambasted this guy. They didn't help him. I was like, you know, that's social media. That's how it works. And so I kind of taught myself how to do it. I found the information and kind of put it together. I'd watch how people would do stuff. I'd look at it and say, maybe I want to do it a little bit differently. Maybe I can improve on that. Maybe I can do it exactly the way they do it. And so I think the thing is, it's important as you learn this to help other guys do it. Help them learn how to do it because the information is not readily available all the time. It's out there. You just have to be able to find it. That was one of my intentions, help other people get into it. The other intention was to have them do it affordably. Because the first thing I noticed, again, I thought about getting back into this in the 80s, but then when I found out how much it cost, I thought, I'm not going to mortgage the house for this. So the low elliptical orbit satellites that started launching in the teens made it possible for everybody to do it. And there's another thing to point out, and I'm probably pointing out the obvious, is when we were in Texas, she wouldn't let me buy a house because she wanted to move back up here. And so we were living in townhouses that we would lease. So I didn't have a permanent station set up. So if I operated the low bands, I would have to take and operate portable. And I thought about doing this, and then when I found out they had the satellites, I put that together. And it was really neat because I could operate really easy. I could just go out, and that was it. It was a portable station. So people that are in HOAs, people that are in condos or apartments, this is a way for them to get on the air. And it's a way for them to get on the air in a big way. I mean, they can get distance on there, they can do awards, they can do everything. And in some cases, more than you could do on low bands. I mean, you're not going to talk off-world on the low bands. So it made it really nice. And this is a way, especially like for new hams, that really want to do something exciting, they can do it. So,
Did trees create a lot of interference with a setup like that?
yes and no, it depends. Sometimes they do, but I've noticed where it goes below the tree line and I can hear it. I think part of that is because I'm kind of getting used to the topography here, that when I'm looking at a tree line, there's probably a hill behind it. So to answer your question, not that much. Not that much.
Any other questions? Anybody? No stupid question.
Yeah, and let's see, what else did I want to mention about that too? We've all heard of VHF distance records, right? Where they go like, 1,000 miles or 2,000 miles. And the thing is when you think of it, routinely hitting something 600 miles or 600 kilometers, 250 miles away, it really strikes home that if there's nothing in the way, that signal is just going to keep going, and you're going to be able to work the guy. And I knew that. I mean, I knew that from the time I got my novice. But the thing is, when you see it in play, it's like, dang, that signal really does go that far. So it's kind of neat. So, but if anybody has any questions or they want to try to put one of these together, it's easy to do. You can contact me through my site or through Ben. If there's any way I can help, glad to do it. It's a neat part of the hobby. It really is. It's a slick thing. And I was surprised how inexpensively you could do it. I actually thought of even going a step further, which is kind of, my wife got a kick out of it. I said, when you see some of these stations operating like in Central and South America, these guys, remember the guys in the Soviet Union? I don't know how long you guys have been licensed. Remember the Soviet Union, how they used to build their stations from like surplus and everything? They had a guy on 20 meters, they used to call him Spoons, because he put together, somehow he built a Morse code key, and he sounded like spoons. And there were guys in Central and South America like building, like they had a piece of bamboo, and then somehow they got a piece of like welding wire or whatever they got, and they like throw this stuff together, then they got their hands on one of these. And these guys are working satellites. It was just crazy. There's another satellite we can't hit it from up here. There's two other satellites of interest that you should look into. You can't hit them, but you're really fascinating. One is one called LAPAN. That's on an equatorial orbit. So again, low elliptical orbit, 90 minutes, normal, about 90 minutes. So this thing's passing every 90 minutes along the equator. And so these guys are working this all the time. And its footprint goes as far, I don't know how far south, but as far north as about Brownsville, Texas. So we were just outside. I thought of driving down to Brownsville or driving down to Mexico. You know, what are you visiting for? Are you coming to a tourist? No, I'm going to look at satellite. You know, but it was just right. We were right at the limit. So that was one. And another one is the Europeans actually put up the Holy Grail. They put up a geosynchronous ham satellite. And a geosynchronous satellite, if you ever see like Dish TV or something, so you have the globe here. Here's a satellite, and say we're on this part of the globe. It follows. Okay, it's moving just like we're moving, but it stays over the same spot, right? So when you see cable TV, the satellite constellation, it's over the equator. Those satellites are in the same spot in relation to us. And as we rotate, they rotate. So for TV, that was, you know, it's been around since, what, the 80s. But for ham radio, they've never had it. So the Germans got together with Qatar. I guess Qatar does all this stuff. They make all this stuff. But they put up a German, it was Amsat Deutschland. They put up one of their satellites on payload. And so they have a communication satellite, this commercial communication satellite, and it also has a ham radio geosynchronous satellite. So what they do, if you're everywhere from the edge of Brazil to the west to, I think it's way over in East Asia, from Scandinavia down to, I think, South Africa. That's how big that footprint is. This thing's, because it's way out there. And they have like little KU dishes, KU band dishes. And there's guys like in England, like in London, they're living like in they call it a flat over there, like an apartment. So out the window, they have this little satellite dish just aimed at a fixed location, and they can work that whole area. And it's up in the microwave region, so they use a down converter to get it down to VHF. Okay, and they have a passband. This thing, one call does it all. They have a passband, so they can do voice, they can do data, they can do SSTV. I don't know if they can do fast scan. I think they can. I mean, they can just, it's incredible. You can listen to this satellite. It's Q100. So if you, I don't know, I didn't put on the links, but Google Q100, there is a receives internet stream, receiver in England, and it streams the audio. And if you've ever used a WebSDR, have you guys used a WebSDR before?
Yep.
Okay. WebSDR, websdr.org. Okay, you can listen to receive sites all over. A lot of guys that are doing DX, they'll want to know how they're sounding in Europe. So they'll find a receiver in Europe that streams. They'll go on that. They'll go on a frequency. They'll key up, and they can hear themselves. So a lot of guys use it for that. But you can listen to HF all over the world on receivers. Well, one of them happens to be QO100, and it's just fascinating that this thing is geosynchronous orbit and just it's there all the time. And they've been trying to do it here, and there's a little, you know how it is. There's a lot of politics, and some are like, no, we want to have high elliptical orbit, and other guys are like, no, we should do the same thing the Europeans are doing. So it's a kind of a debate, but if you get a chance, check that out. It's really, really fascinating. And I saw that, I was.
Well, sounds good. Thanks.